home, and you have a choice between get automatically from DHP server, typical, yes, that's very typical, or I like this one, let me specify a static IP address. That sounds great. Yeah, let me do that. So all of a sudden, we have this piece of consumer technology in the home that's talking about DHCP servers and IP addresses. Fortunately, now my daughter is 8 years old and quite the computer whiz, so now it's her job. Instead of it being me as the remote control, now it's Kira. Please program the TiVo. So that works pretty well. Then in other areas, culture is getting smarter. This example, I actually got this example from a book called Everything Bad is Good for You, which I highly recommend. Talking about how it's very common to imagine that pop culture is getting dumber and dumber, and people are getting dumber and dumber. But in fact, if you really look at some examples, that isn't true. Here we have I Love Lucy, which is a very fabulous old comedy, of course. But it was a very simple comedy. Very simple plots every time, very simple humor. Later on, we went to Mary Tyler Moore, which was a much more sophisticated program. It dealt with more interesting social issues through humor, had a larger, more interesting cast. And then we get to something like Seinfeld, which, of course, is a very sophisticated comedy with many inside jokes and rewards for the fans, all kinds of complicated plots and very intricate storylines. And people loved that. And so in this realm, we see that culture has become smarter. TV drama, same thing. Dragnet was a very simple cop show, cops and robbers. Then we went to Hill Street Blues, large ensemble cast. And then today we had shows like The Sopranos, which not only had a very large ensemble cast and many multiple plot lines and subplots, but also had a very strong element of moral ambiguity and very interesting dilemmas and things, and a very thought-provoking show. Video games, same thing. I don't even have to talk about this, but one of the things that is interesting, as we went, first from a simple game like Pong to a simple game like Doom and Quake, is that we started to move from sort of the human and computer environment to something like World of Warcraft, which is a very complex social game where people come together in large groups and form guilds, and the social aspect of the game and how things are organized socially is very complicated and is just as important as the actual physical gameplay in the game. And so this has actually meant a change in how we get information about pop culture, how we get information about things in our lives. In the old days, all you needed was TV Guide. You open up the TV Guide to see when I Love Lucy's coming on, and it has one sentence to explain which episode it is, and that's all you need. Today, we have TV shows like Lost, and we have websites like Lostpedia, which is a Wikia site. This slide is a bit out of order. And then we have things, in other areas. We have with recipes. Gourmet Magazine just went out of business, and now today, consumers who are wanting information about cooking and food, they aren't turning to a magazine which comes out only once a month and has a handful of recipes and a handful of articles. They're turning to the internet, which has a huge explosion of information. So the good news is we're getting smarter too. We have all kinds of different things. So returning to the Lost example, how many people here watch Lost? Oh, lots of people. But I think even the people who don't watch Lost probably are aware of it. But the point I want to make about Lost is an incredibly complicated TV program. It has a very, very large ensemble cast, and there are many, many mysteries and layers of mystery within within the show. And a lot of it, even if you're an avid fan and you're watching every single episode, you probably haven't seen or understood everything about it. I'm a casual fan of the show. I've watched many, many episodes, but I don't necessarily understand everything about it. But fortunately, there's the Lostpedia. And the Lostpedia is a wiki website where people have come together. The super fans, the really uber fans have come together to build something that's really quite remarkable. At Lostpedia, they have now 5,794 articles about one TV show, which is kind of amazing. The material is incredibly enormous and expansive. There's something like 8,000 people have contributed. They've discovered all kinds of little details that as a casual viewer of the show, even as a fan of the show, you probably don't know. They've added up how many people on the show are murderers. I think I saw the number is 34. There are 34 different murderers on the show that they've documented so far. Things like there's one actor who has appeared in 3 different episodes as different characters and sort of unacknowledged within the text of the show. And so this community of people who noticed it, I never noticed it, I just watched the show. This community, now that of course they can speculate, is this something that's deep and meaningful to the show, or is it just that they decided to get cheap and hire the same guy 3 times? It's kind of hard to say. But those are the kinds of details that people are able to document. And what I think is really interesting about this is that as culture has gotten smarter, we now have these adjuncts. We have these the wikis and other things on the internet where people are able to turn to assist them in understanding what's going on. So where did this all come from? How did we get here? And so Wikipedia was really the start. Wikipedia was the great experiment to see, can people come together and create something? In 1962, Charles Van Doren said, the ideal encyclopedia should be radical. It should stop being safe. But if you know anything about the history of the Encyclopedia Britannica since 1962, it's been anything but radical. Britannica is still a very safe, old-fashioned, a very high-quality encyclopedia project. Wikipedia, on the other hand, began with a very radical idea. And that's for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. And that's what we're doing. So every piece of that mission statement for Wikipedia is very important. Free access to the sum of all human knowledge. Every single person on the planet. Even the word sum has a certain meaning, which I'll talk about. So what is Wikipedia? I mean, everybody in the room, I'm sure, uses Wikipedia. If you're in this room and you don't use Wikipedia, you probably want to check your badge. You might have shown up at the wrong conference. What a lot of people who are just using Wikipedia may not understand is all of the ideas behind Wikipedia. The Wikipedia is a freely licensed encyclopedia written by thousands of volunteers in many languages. So what do I mean by free access? When I talk about free access to the sum of all human knowledge, or I talk about a freely licensed encyclopedia, what I'm talking about is free in the sense of GNU, in the sense of open source software. The idea here in open source software and free software is that for everything that we do, both the actual work, the content, and also the software, is that it's all freely licensed. And so that means that you can copy it, you can modify it, you can redistribute it, you can redistribute modified versions, and you can do all of these things commercially or non-commercially. So when people are using Wikipedia and they're contributing to Wikipedia, they aren't just contributing to this one humanitarian project. They're contributing to a storehouse of knowledge that we hope will be reused by people in many, many different ways. And it is being reused by people in a lot of different ways. And that's a really good thing. So that's a really core value for our community. When we talk about the sum of all human knowledge, this is really important as well. Wikipedia is not everything in the world. It isn't a complete data dump. It isn't a storehouse for everything. It is not a library. Wikipedia is something very specific, which is an encyclopedia. And what an encyclopedia does, an encyclopedia offers an essentialized summary of human knowledge with the depth of material depending on the context. So what this means is not everything belongs in Wikipedia. What are some of the kinds of things that don't belong in Wikipedia? Well, let's imagine the Wikipedia entry on the Eiffel Tower. So the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, and if you imagine an encyclopedia article about the Eiffel Tower, it turns out all of us have more or less the same idea of what that should be. We can quibble on the details, but what an encyclopedia article should do is it should tell you where it's located, when it was built, who it was built by, why it was built, what were some of the cultural impacts of it. And that entry should be a few pages long. What you're not looking for when you go to read an encyclopedia article about the Eiffel Tower is you're not looking for jokes about the Eiffel Tower. You're not looking for silly vacation movies that people made in front of the Eiffel Tower. All the kinds of things that you could find in YouTube and other places don't belong in Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a very serious project, and it should give you that essentialized summary so that when you go there, you know what you're going to get, and you get what you expect. So how global is Wikipedia? I talk a lot about free access for every single person on the planet, and that is our mission. And one of the great strengths of Wikipedia is because Wikipedia is in the nonprofit organization, the nonprofit is very focused on that global mission in a way that a commercial enterprise really couldn't afford to be. It wouldn't make sense. Fortunately, we do have several internet companies who are globally minded, but even there, they can't have the same focus on languages that don't have the same kind of economic importance or the advertising world importance. So today, we have more than 3 million articles in English, and English is the largest project, but it turns out that English is less than 20% of the total work. We now have over 500,000 in German, French, Polish, Japanese, Italian, Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese. But when you look at these languages, what you see is these are mostly European languages. The one exception in the very top group is Japanese. We have a very, very strong Japanese Wikipedia. But beyond the European languages and Japanese, it begins to fall off. And just to give one example, in Hindi, which is the largest language of India, we have now around 51,000 articles. Actually, it's a little higher than that. That number's a few weeks out of date. So let's call it 52 or 53,000 by now. But there are 280 million people who are speaking Hindi. So this is a very large language with a fairly small encyclopedia project. So when we look at the distribution of Wikipedia all around the world, it follows a pattern that you would expect. It's much bigger in places that have high literacy rates, much bigger in places that have good access to broadband information, broadband internet. I just arrived yesterday from Finland. Finland, in the Finnish Wikipedia, has 220,000 articles, even though there are only 5 million people speaking Finnish. And so that's kind of an example to show you what is possible with a small number of people. And yet, in a lot of languages, we aren't hitting that yet. So we're really focusing a lot of attention these days on thinking about how do we make Wikipedia more accessible and more usable to all of those people all around the world. And there's a lot of interesting things about that. So how popular is Wikipedia? Obviously, it's very, very popular, but I think it's interesting to look at some of the breakdown. These numbers are according to Alexa, I don't know how accurate Alexa's numbers are, but there's some numbers to look at anyway. So we're the 5th most popular in Germany, 6th most popular in the US, 9th most popular in India, 9th most popular in Japan, and I think this one's interesting, 14th most popular in Iran. Iran is not the kind of place that people normally associate with the kind of Enlightenment values that Wikipedia represents, and yet Wikipedia is very, very popular with ordinary people in Iran as it is everywhere all around the world. The Farsi language Wikipedia is a very active community. It's still a fairly small project by global standards, but it's actually doing very well. And when we look at what is in that language, it's exactly more or less the same as every other language. They have a real passion for technology, and one of the things I always joke about, but it's actually true, is that there is a certain geek culture which transcends national culture. So even in the Iranian Wikipedia, we'll see a huge amount of work devoted to science fiction and things like this that the early geek adopter crowd is really interested in. So now I'm going to turn and talk more about Wiki. So we now have seen, how culture is getting a lot smarter, things are getting much more complicated. Wikipedia was the great experiment, which really showed how people can come together and collaborate. And now Wikia is the new project and is doing very, very well. Wikia is a completely separate company. We have a different office and a different staff and so forth. And the idea here at Wikia is that an encyclopedia was the start. So if you imagine walking into a traditional library and you ask the librarian for the encyclopedia, they'll point you to a set of books about this big. But the library is much bigger. There is a huge amount of stuff that you can have in a library that doesn't belong in an encyclopedia. So Wikia is growing on a very similar pattern to Wikipedia. A little slower, but still it's been growing very, very strongly, and we're really excited about that. According to Quantcast, we're now ranked in the top 100. 83 is a little bit out of date. It was 79 a couple days ago, unless we fell. It goes up and down every day, of course. And our traffic has been doubling every year, and we don't see any signs of that stopping. And in fact, recently we made some changes to the software, which has really caused a huge explosion in growth. And now we're seeing a new wiki created every 6 minutes. Now, of course, it's very easy to create a wiki at Wikia, many of these wikis, they get started and they never go anywhere. And in some ways, it's kind of like a blog platform. How many people create a blog and then post 2 times and never come back? But out of that, a lot of gems begin to emerge, and all kinds of interesting communities that we wouldn't have predicted are beginning to pop up and surprise us. So in many ways, Wikia is now beginning to surpass traditional media. This is a chart showing a graph of our traffic versus the New York Times. We recently passed the New York Times, but I think the more recent data, we've fallen behind a little bit in terms of page views. Again, this is according to Alexa, so I'm not sure how much I trust it, but it's such a pretty graph, I have to show it. But the point is, when people are using the internet, they are coming to sites like Wikia. So the other example is that Gourmet Magazine just went out of business. And they went out of business, in short, because they weren't meeting the needs of consumers and advertisers. Meanwhile, the Recipes Wiki, so our Recipes Wiki, this is according to Quantcast, is ranked something like around number 8,000 something on the internet. And Gourmet Magazine's website was ranked something like 17,000. Now, in some ways, this is not a fair comparison. Gourmet Magazine, a print magazine, never really had a strong online presence. And additionally, the Wikia recipe site is absolutely not the #1 recipe site on the internet. The point is more about how, as consumers are shifting their attention, as they're beginning to come online, they're expecting different kinds of information, they're expecting a lot more information, and all kinds of internet properties are surpassing the traditional properties. They are not really making it online, and additionally, they're beginning to not make it in the real world as well. The traditional magazines are really struggling, and some of them will survive and do well. I'm not predicting the death of the magazine business, but many of them that are not keeping up with the times are not going to survive. But then, in addition to that, we can see these kinds of parallels. We can think about things that existed in the past and how they're being replaced, or how there's competition from new media. We can think about the traditional editorial page of the newspaper versus the political blogosphere. And we can see, there's a really strong parallel there, and one is competing with and replacing the other. We can think about Wikipedia versus Britannica. But one of the things that's interesting to me is how we're seeing the emergence of different kinds of works that really never existed before. So one of my favorite examples from Wikia, this is a wiki that just popped up and is doing very well. They have a few hundred articles. So Canon cameras, they now have hackable firmware. And so there's a group of people who are able to hack the firmware of the camera and basically reprogram the camera to do all kinds of cool things. And they do this through a wiki. So we have the CHDK wiki, where the power users of this software are basically coming together, and instead of just talking to each other as a bunch of camera geeks on a message board, they're actually building step-by-step instructions so that anybody can follow the instructions and can actually hack the firmware of their camera. And they have several hundred articles about all the cool things you can do with it, why you would want to do it, step-by-step instructions of how to do it. And if you really want to dig deep and get involved, you can even learn how you get involved in actually making new firmware yourself. Or you can just install some of the modules that other people have done. We don't know for sure, but we believe that some of the Canon engineers are involved on the wiki. Just the quality of the information and the things that come out there. And Canon has been very, very friendly to people who are hacking the firmware. So what's interesting about this is that, in a very obscure kind of way, the firmware of a camera, Canon is doing a really brilliant job of engaging with social media. They basically have provided something so that they are really able to turn the super camera geeks into evangelists. So that if I'm just some person who wants to get a camera and I ask my friend who's a super camera geek what kind of camera I can get, they're more likely to say Canon, because they can say, oh, well, the cool thing about Canon is you can download all these cool hacks and you can do all kinds of really interesting things with your camera, and with the competition you can't do that. So we think it's really important for brands to start thinking about wikis and to come to us and work with us. There's my sales pitch. Because when consumers today they're wanting this kind of in-depth information, and it's really important that they engage with this kind of thing. Here's a completely different example. This is a friend of mine, Julia Gorska. She's a social media and brand consultant in Tampa, Florida, where I live. And she's really interested in her spare time in the issue of homelessness. and she wanted to help. She's not a computer programmer. She's not an expert in homelessness, but she wanted to help. And so she has created the Tampa Bay Homeless Resource Wiki, which hasn't even launched yet. She's just, it's up and running, and we have an intern helping her get started on it. And this is modeled on successful projects that have gone on in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so basically what this is, it's where people who are the service providers, people who are providing services to the homeless, are working together, especially in San Francisco, because there's a guy there who's really coordinated a lot of people. And I've talked to some people in the community there who say, wow, this is the resource that we're using today. They're able to keep it up to date in real time. They're able to create a resource that serves 3 different communities at once. So they're able to serve other service providers so that they know, they're aware of each other's services and what they're offering. They are able to provide a resource so that if you are a local preacher, for example, or a priest, and you know of someone in your community who is at risk of being homeless or who has just become homeless, you can come to this site and help and learn like what are the resources that you can help that person find. In the past, this kind of information was really hard to come by. It was very disparate. You could call up different agencies, and it was really hard to figure out. And now it's being, in San Francisco in particular, it's being really honed into a very easy-to-use body of information, and then direct use by the end user. People who are either about to become homeless, who are homeless, they can go find access to the internet. They can get online and they can type, homeless in San Francisco, and hopefully they'll find the wiki, and they'll be able to dig through it and find out, where's a shelter, what kind of government assistance can I get, all those kinds of things. And so this is the kind of a resource that is not a replacement for something that existed before. This is a community coming together to build something that has never existed, and I think that's really interesting and important. There's sites like Wikia Green, where people are coming together to talk about sustainable living, and we're really hopeful about this wiki, that it will become big and popular, because it's a consumer-oriented resource where people can come and find out different kinds of solutions. And then we have our recent surprise hit at answers.wikia.com. We did a nice little redesign of the software, and all of a sudden this one really exploded in terms of participation. And it's a very simple concept. People can come and ask a question, and then other people can come and answer the question. But unlike something like Yahoo Answers, where the answering process is more like a message board and then you pick the best answer, it's a collaborative process. If I put up an answer and you come along and you say, the answer is pretty good, but there's actually more information or it's not clearly written, you can improve the answer. And so we have some of the answers that are getting improved a lot. Sometimes it's just somebody asks the question and somebody gives the answer. Sometimes the answer is just one sentence because it's basically the answer to a very simple question. And this has really seen a huge and surprising amount of growth. In music, we just bought a site, the Lyrics Wiki. This is Gagapedia, which I think is kind of fun. We just bought Lyric Wiki, and this wiki has now nearly 1 million entries. And this one's a surprising kind of innovation because for most of the wikis at Wikia, we follow the same pattern as Wikipedia in that we make sure that everything is freely licensed. Some of our wikis, the ones that we have purchased or inherited somehow, are under a non-commercial license, which is truly a free license. But the Lyric Wiki is actually interesting. We have a license from Gracenote that allows the community to work on updating and creating articles about the lyrics, even though this is copyrighted content. And so that's one of the problems that we've seen in the past. And so basically we just work with Gracenote to say, look, there's a huge community of people and they really want to do this, and so we have to pay them every month something, and then the community gets to come in and document whatever they want. What's interesting is, in the Lyric Wiki, unlike some sort of top-down publication of lyrics, the community is able to document lyrics that have never been published because they just listen to it. They can argue about what the lyric actually says. But they also document things like, sometimes bands will do completely different lyrics just one night in one show. I heard about an example of it's like a Halloween concert, and on Halloween they did different lyrics to one of their famous songs. That information, you wouldn't find it published anywhere, but the community has documented it, and that works really well. So, why is this the future? What is going on that is making this move away from the magazine culture to the wiki culture work? And it's basically across the web. In total, the consumer-generated content is becoming dominant. So if you go to Google and you type Muppet, and this was just a couple days ago, the things that come up here, the first link there is the Muppet Wiki, which is the Wikia site. Then we had, after that, we got the Wikipedia entry, of course. Then we have the Muppet Central fan site, so this is a message board about the Muppets. And in fact, if you go all the way down the page, sometimes the official site is in the top 10, and sometimes it isn't. But mostly what's in the top 10 is where people are having conversations about the Muppets. And it's consumer-generated content. And so it's no wonder that these things are very, very popular because it's what people are doing. So how do I see brand marketers getting in on the fun here? We've got really now hundreds of wikis that are very large. We have now over 30,000 wikis, many of which are very small and just beginning to grow. And the idea is fish where the fish are. One of the things with the Flash Forward wiki, we are working with ABC. They basically, what they want with Flash Forward is in some ways similar to Lost. It's a very complicated, very rich, sophisticated show, science fiction. They know it's going to appeal to the Lost fans, but what they really want to do is generate buzz about the show. They really want to get those fans engaged who are the kind of people who will go out and evangelize about the show. And so they're advertising heavily on the Lost Wiki because they know that's exactly where people are. So why am I optimistic about my vision for the future? One of the main reasons is really my daughter. I told you earlier my daughter's job now in the house is to program the TiVo, but watching her and how she's using culture and how she's using the internet, she barely even watches television. I mean, since she has a TiVo, she can get shows. She spends huge amounts of time online. She's blogging. And she and I, one of the things we do, because I travel way too much, is we play RuneScape together. So it's an online multiplayer game. And she totally kicks my butt in RuneScape. So recently she gave me her best armor, her best sword. She fought me in bare feet, and she totally kicked my butt. And I said, how did you get so good at this game? And she said, oh, I found all these cool tricks on the wiki. So she goes to the RuneScape wiki, and she reads and reads and reads and reads, and she has all this information. Of course, she plays a lot, so her character actually is much higher level. She's like a level 23, and I'm a level 6. It's actually funny. I said to her, it's not as fun, when we're fighting. You always beat me, even when I have the best sword. I said, maybe you have a lot more time than I do. Maybe you could get on my account and play for me and help my character get stronger. And she said, how much will you pay me? I said, oh, my daughter, the gold farmer. Really great. But this is the way, this is the new wave of culture. When we see things like Twilight or we see things like anime, all of these topics are really, really big on the internet, and they're really driving pop culture forward. They're really the next wave of things that's going on in society. So finally, if you pick up the pen, if you decide to create a wiki, I have some basic advice for people. There's a lot of things that we've learned in the wiki communities and in the wiki culture that are very, very important. A couple of the most important things, one of our old sayings is, be bold. One of the great things about a wiki is that you can't damage anything. It's really pretty much impossible to hurt a wiki. So when people go in and they start to edit, if they screw something up, it's very easy to revert back to the old version. And so be bold. Just go in and start working, start trying. Don't sit around planning too long. Just get started, write a few articles, show some friends, and it begins to take off that way. Another one is assume good faith. And this is a really important part of the wiki community. One of the social differences between that emerges between, say, the blogging culture and the wiki culture is that the blogging culture tends to be a much more argumentative, combative, competitive culture, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the wiki culture, by the very design of the software, instead of having a debate or a discussion with people, you're actually collaborating with them. And so this idea of assume good faith, if somebody comes into your wiki and they start screwing everything up, probably, and the empirical evidence very strongly supports this, and we've seen it many, many times, when somebody comes into a wiki and they start screwing everything up, probably they're not trying to do harm. They're probably trying to do something beneficial, but they just don't understand the point, or they really don't understand what's going on. And, if you talk to them and say, hey, knock it off, why are you doing this? You're wrecking everything. They'll usually say, no, I'm trying to do X. And you say, oh, I understand what you're trying to do. Let me help you, and we can do it in a better way. And then finally, one of the most important principles of the wiki is that quality matters, that openness is not the enemy of quality, that you can, with this software and with all the techniques that have emerged over time, you can have a social norm and a social structure that is focused on generating something of quality. And unlike something that's completely anarchic, like an unmoderated message board or something, the community actually has the power to control, so that when you do get that very rare, 1 in 5,000 people who really wants to do nothing more than spread negativity and cause trouble, you can actually ban them from the site. And the community can come together and have a discussion to say, look, really this is not helpful. This is not what we're trying to accomplish here. We're going to ask this person to leave, and often that's a very gut-wrenching thing for communities to do, but it's also very important for them to do. It's important to be both tolerant and accepting of newcomers and assume good faith, but not infinitely. In the end, you have to say, look, you're really not here to do what it is that we're trying to do. By the way, you can start your own wiki, so if all you want is a wiki full of curse words, you can go make one. Leave us alone. We're trying to write about Lost. We're making Lostpedia, and it's all about Lost. So that's the end of my prepared remarks. Thank you.
We get the mics out, and we're going to open it up to questions. I have one quick question before we go to the audience, and this whole thing about paid content, and should it be free, and what will people pay for, and obviously, so looking at something like the recipe wiki, right? Because that's freely available and highly detailed and highly valuable to consumers, does that mean that the gourmets of the world, with past, present, and future, they're not going to be able to come up with content solutions where that type of content is going to be able to be, people will pay for that? What are people going to pay for, and how far does the information wants to be free sort of idea go?
So I think that we see a lot of basic functional information, even very high quality basic functional information, can be produced by a community and can be made freely available. And we see this happening. Wikipedia is the classic example. In terms of how far does that go, I think that there is still very much room for this strong, passionate individual voice. And so I think that it's very possible for a famous chef to produce content that people are willing to pay for a lot of different kinds of reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is just you really love this chef, and you want to have something by them. My daughter is a huge fan of Icon's cheeseburger, and one of her great, proudest achievements in life, if you asked her proudest achievements, it would be, graduating from 3rd grade and getting one of her little captioned silly cat pictures. It made it to the front page of iconscheeseburger.com, which was like the hugest day in her life. And got, she has hundreds of fans following her on this site, and she makes these silly cartoons all the time. But she also, when she saw in the bookstore, she saw the Icon Has Cheeseburger book, which contains a very small 100 examples. She was really excited to buy it, and she loves her Icon Has Cheeseburger book, even though all of those same cartoons are online. It's like a physical thing, and for her, it's like an identification thing. She's like, I love this website, I want the book. So there's a lot of things like that I can imagine.
Is there certain information that will always want to be free? That always will be free?
Yeah, I mean, Wikipedia will always be free. I think when people predict, I guess the one maybe slightly provocative thing I can say here is that there are still people who are predicting that micropayments are going to emerge and that people are going to be charging for content in small amounts. This is never going to happen. I just don't see any demand for that on the part of the people who are producing content. They really aren't interested in making $7 a month. That's not an appeal to people. This idea that payment, somehow your desire for payment scales linearly is just not true. For a lot of people, we've actually seen this. We've had a couple of examples where at Wikia, we knew somebody from one wiki, one of the gaming wikis, and we said, oh, you're doing really great work. We'd like to hire you as an intern to help us build this new wiki. And one guy said, no, it's like, what do you want me to do? I'll just do it. But I don't really want to work for you, because if you're paying me, you're going to be telling me how to do it and when to do it. It's like, I'm happy. It sounds like it's going to be a cool game, and so I'm probably going to end up working the week anyway. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
What if someone wants?
He doesn't want to make a few $100 a week. That's not a big deal to him. It's not his interest. It's not that important.
How does someone work at Wikipedia or Wikia if someone wants to work with you?
Oh, well.
Are you hiring?
Yeah. At Wikia, we're hiring. At Wikipedia right now, the main job they're looking for is a chief development officer. So
there you go. Send in your resumes.
At Wikia, we do hire people. We hire interns. We hire people to help seed content, to help grow the different communities. A lot of what we do is customer support, and so one of the reasons people come to us, I mean, the software is all open source, so they could just download it and run it on their own server. We try to make it too tempting to not do that.
Right.
To just say, you can run your own server, but you got to know you have to have technical expertise, and it's a pain in the ass. Reliability can be an issue. Also, we're here 24/7 with tech support for your users. If people have a question on the wiki, we try to answer it as quickly as possible.
We're 24/7, have people working on it worldwide, I imagine.
Yeah.
Real time. So I'll go to the audience for one, but I think this is a great question. And where's Mickey? Where are you, Mickey? Mickey's good. There. Good question, Mickey. What's your mobile strategy? That's a good one. I mean, in terms of the apps and we've talked a lot about mobile the last few days here.
Yeah, well, so I guess really I should talk in terms of mobile strategy. I'm not going to talk about Wikia. I'll talk about Wikipedia because Wikia doesn't really have a mobile strategy per se yet. I mean, we want to make the site accessible on mobile, but we're not really focused on that. At Wikipedia, this is becoming increasingly something that we're very, very interested in because as a charity, we're really focused on bringing free information to everyone. Right now, when I talk about the next billion people who are going to come online, they're going to come online, the vast majority of them, the first time that people are going to see the internet is on a mobile device. Right now, the penetration of mobile, as everybody knows, is becoming quite high, even in some of the poorest places in the world. However, today, the kinds of mobile phones that people are using, they can send SMS and they can make calls, but it's not like they're all out there with their iPhones, right? But that's coming in the next 5 to 10 years. Moore's law and just the ongoing technology. We're going to see a day where in an African village they're going to have an iPhone, right? Or the equivalent, due to Nokia's prominence outside the U.S. Right. I think the Nokia devices will be very popular there. Well, they're going to be accessing Wikipedia there. And many of the people who come online in that fashion they're not part of the educated classes that we see today coming on who are speaking English or French. They're going to be ordinary people who are speaking only their local language. And there's very little content for them right now. Right. And because they are poor people, there's not a lot of economic incentive to create content for them. That doesn't really matter, especially not to Wikipedia. We don't really care how much money you have. You're a human being and you want knowledge, then we're trying to help you. So we think that it's really important for us to be very accessible on mobile, particularly in the languages of the developing world. And we're, talking to, I just spoke at Symbian and I just spoke at Nokia. Yeah. I'm going and I'm talking to these people and saying, really, we think it's a killer app for mobile in the developing world. And we're here to help you, and we really want to work with you to make sure that it's accessible there. It's great.
I think we had one right here. You can identify yourself as well.
My name is David Genshwin, Digital Mobile. My question is about vetting. I spend a lot of time on Wikipedia. Many of the pages say that they're biased or incomplete stubs or that citations are needed. And my thesis advisor was not really happy with any of the citations I made from Wikipedia. So as much as this is different and supplanting things like the Britannica or journal articles, do you feel that there's any need to make this more authoritative and correct right. and reliable?
So yes, and there's actually many parts to my answer, so I could speak about that topic for an hour, but I'll just hit a few of the highlights. First of all, our goal is to make Wikipedia as high quality as possible. Britannica or better quality is the goal. And we're always focused on thinking about what are the tools that the community needs in order to make Wikipedia better. Now, I think one of the great strengths of Wikipedia is something that you might initially think of as a weakness. And one of the great strengths is that when Wikipedia tells you the neutrality of this article has been disputed, or the following section doesn't cite any references, I think that's a huge strength of Wikipedia. I wish the New York Times would put a disclaimer saying the neutrality of this article has been disputed. Because I would prefer if we had a more transparent news media, for example, where they would say, look, we had a, as a footnote, yay, got one clap. If they, they said as a footnote to an article, hey, by the way, we had a huge argument in the newsroom as to whether to run this story or not. There is some controversy about this story. We decided to run with it. We're going to publish this. But we're just adding a caution flag. Like, this is incomplete information. This is an emerging story. Some of the people feel that the sources of this article are maybe not the most reliable people. Other people will vouch for them. We're going to tell you all this up front. We're going to tell you that we had an argument about it, and we decided to run it and let you decide. We don't have that. Instead, the traditional encyclopedia, by the way, traditional encyclopedias are full of errors, and that's not a criticism. It's just a fact about the difficulty of doing high-quality reference material. But there's been this tradition in publishing always to always have that authoritative tone, and to always, at the end of the day, when you read the New York Times, every article, whether they're 100% sure, or they're 99% sure, or they're 87% sure, it reads in the same way. And that's just the tradition that we've always had. With Wikipedia, there is much more of a tradition of trying to warn you, to say, here there be dragons, and watch out here. And I think that's a strength. But in general, we would like for Wikipedia to be of higher quality, and we think it's really important to give the community tools for that. Finally, the last thing I would say is, it is not my goal to have Wikipedia be the kind of source that you would cite in a thesis. I don't believe that is the role of an encyclopedia in the research process. I don't think that it's legitimate in an academic paper to cite Britannica. I think that's not what Britannica is for. I think an encyclopedia is to give you broad background knowledge and give you pointers so that you can go out and do your own research, and that's what you should be doing at that level. And so I'm not really concerned about making sure that Wikipedia is citable, because even if Wikipedia was 100% perfect through and through, I still just don't think that's what an encyclopedia is for.
Well, again, I know we got time for one more, Warren? You're the timekeeper, Warren, so I'll let you decide.
Yeah, real quick. Sort of a brainstorming question, but also specific guidance of where you're going forward with Wikia project. First of all, I have participated locally in New York City with the Wikipedia Loves Art, and how they've gotten local people to contribute content, and it's great. So my question is about how you're creating partnerships with local organizations like nonprofits to create Wikia content, and brand marketers. And I got a positive response at the end of yesterday at the panel on the buyers and how they're focusing on hyperlocal and how those themes can sort of tie in to promote your project.
So I think one important thing to think about is how, because our work is really about providing a platform, and I would say this both really for Wikipedia and for Wikia, the work of the organization is to provide the platform. And then the community builds whatever they want. And in the case of Wikipedia, whatever they want is this high-quality encyclopedia. So they're very focused on that. So for example, Wikipedia Loves Art was a local project, just to tell people who haven't heard about this, it was a local project to work with museums to go out and do photographs of artworks. Is that correct? Yeah. But this had nothing to do with the Wikimedia Foundation, which owns and operates Wikipedia. It was basically some people locally in the local community in New York who contacted a museum, and basically it was all very grassroots done. The only involvement we had is that one person who was involved with it came over to my apartment in New York and did a little video of me saying, "Great, thank you, it's really great that we're doing this." But there was no top-down sort of business development person who was doing outreach to museums and coming and doing PowerPoints to explain to them why they should do this. It's all community-based. When we look at the Wikia sites that are local, and the main things that we've seen successes in locally, actually these homeless projects are actually something that we've seen it in San Francisco and now in Los Angeles, and now one is emerging in Tampa where I live. And again, that's just local people who are looking around and saying, okay, look, we have this need. We know that to help homeless people, one of the biggest problems we have is that there are all these resources available that are going unused because people don't know about it. And so how can we solve this? In fact, we have different people in the community working on different aspects of the problem. They don't even know about each other. How do we solve this? And they're realizing, hey, a wiki is actually a perfect tool for that. We can get everybody together. We can share the information. And so that's kind of happening as well at a grassroots level. It's not like we have anybody on staff who's doing outreach to this. Now, the Tampa Bay one's a little unusual. I live there, and so as a community member, not as an official part of the company, I'm participating in that, and I'm helping get that set up. But that's just, I don't feel like I'm doing that as part of the company. I'm just like a customer of our service who's using it. So and I think this is really an interesting thing, is that, we work best with loose collaboration rather than formal partnerships. It's just frustrating sometimes to people who are used to a different way of thinking. With brand marketers, it's a little bit different story because they have a budget and they can help us in various ways. And one of the things that we're really interested in doing is helping people who need, they realize, okay, we have something like Flash Forward, a TV show, or we have any kind of a product that's information dense that we feel like there could be a community for. But we don't really know what to do, and so we want to help them generate that community, help them provide a home for that community. But there's limits to that. I mean, the truth is, if you are certain types of brands, I always give the example of Doritos, right? There's never going to be, in my humble opinion, and I know a couple things about wikis, there's never going to be a Doritos wiki that's a huge, massive success with thousands of articles. There's just not that much to write about Doritos. It's not an information-dense product that's going to create a community around it. That doesn't mean there's not an importance for Doritos to figure out where their customers are and talk to them at the right time and say, oh, you're watching Lost, maybe you want to eat some Doritos in the meantime. But that, one of my big points is that generating communities is not something that can ever happen top-down. Brand marketers can assist with the process, but unless you have the kind of a product that people care about and that they can authentically join a community for, then it's never going to happen. Okay. That's great. And I guess that's it.
That is. Special thanks to Jimmy, because I know you spoke in Helsinki yesterday and you have to speak in Washington, D.C. tonight. And yes. He decided to stop over in New York to come talk with all of us. So, again, a big round of applause and thank you. Jimmy jump-started our brains, and we're going to go to the Shelley Palmer and the Feed Your Brain sessions, a special announcement. Even if you are Expo only, all badge holders are welcome to come join us for the remaining sessions of the day. We'll see you in San Francisco in April and back here next year. Thanks.